Samantha McLean from Elite Agent Magazine, and here we are with highlights from Transform in Week 5, where we started to look at the psychology behind successful salespeople with mindset coach Jed Xavier and sales coach and NLP practitioner Charmaine Keegan. Have you ever wondered why it is sometimes you just click with some people and not with others? Has there ever been a time when you lost a listing just because the vendor simply other liked the guy or girl more? Well, there is a neurological explanation for this, and it's something that you can work on. Charmaine Keegan proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that there is a way to communicate seamlessly with just about anyone, elicit their buying strategy, and make them feel good about choosing you. Sounds pretty clever, right? Here are some of the highlights.
If you can understand how to communicate with somebody and behave differently, and you understand the order and sequence in which that person processes information, it means that you can deliver back in the same order and sequence your solution to that person, and that language will make total sense to them. So that's how it's one of the most powerful parts of neuro-linguistic programming. It's sort of right up there with something that could be a complete game changer in your industry. Every time we do any behaviour at all, every single thing we do, every part of the day is run through a strategy. So the way you got out of bed this morning, how you opened up the door, how you dressed, how you walked down maybe a corridor, how you put the kettle on, how you decided to even walk to the bathroom, what clothes to wear, how you decided to get on public transport or not to get on public transport, where you sat on the public transport, how you got into the car, how you do every single element of our behaviour is controlled by a strategy. We are normally completely unaware of the strategy until somebody runs one differently. For example, recently I went to the cinema and I thought, well, I can sit anywhere in the cinema. But the reality is, I was with a friend and her strategy was to sit in a certain place, and as when she sat in a place I would never sit in. So then it becomes apparent to you, if somebody isn't running the same strategy as you, you're then aware of it. And I thought, it feels weird to sit in this place. I would never sit in this area of the cinema. And the same for public transport. I've just got the public transport with somebody and they wanted to sit in a different place. So I normally think, well, I'd sit anywhere. But clearly I have a strategy that if certain people are on, I sit in certain places and I don't sit in other places. If you're communicating with somebody exactly the same way as they neurologically think, it's seamless. But if you do it differently, in your language rather than their language, the communication becomes harder. Does that make sense? So recently, here in Sydney, I met a guy called Paul, and he was an English guy. My English friend Dom, who rides a motorbike, that's worth it for the story. He said, can you meet Paul? He wants to know something about digital media. And I said, yeah, no problem. It's not to do with my business, but I run in digital media for a long time. So I met with Paul. And as I met with Paul, this is how powerful strategies are. This is why it just can blow me away. I went to shake his hand. And as I shook his hand and said hello, I noticed he had a really nice watch on, and I happened to mention his watch. So we're in the corner of a coffee shop in North Sydney. And I said, nice watch, Paul. And he goes, oh, thanks. And he sort of told me about this watch as we were walking to our table. And the table was about 3 or 4 metres away. And as he sat down, he took off he's got a rugby player type build, and he took off this beautiful blue velvet jacket. And as he did so, I saw him touch it, because the point of sales is we have to be very aware. And I saw him just gently touch it and even look at it as he took it out and put it on his seat. And I said, nice jacket. And he said, yeah. He said, I bought it last Saturday. And he told me about this jacket. And then I thought, oh, well, I've got the pattern now, but what the hell, a motorbike backfired. And I thought, well, I'll just go for it. I said, oh, have you got a motorbike like Dom? I thought, I'll utilise this bit of joint information that I have. He said, yeah, I have. I said, oh, do you own a motorbike? He said, yeah. I said, how did you buy your last motorbike? He goes, oh, well, I saw it in Top Gear, and he told me all about this motorbike. Well, the waiter came over and took our coffee order. But before that happened, in less than a minute and a half tops, I have elicited an enormous amount of information. I've elicited, amongst other things, his motivational strategy, how he gets motivated, his buying strategy, which is what we're talking about today, how he makes a buying decision, actually how he runs his convincer within that, he's convinced that's the right thing to buy, and his reassurance strategy, which we need to run with vendors so they're not got buyer's remorse and everything, okay? So all of that before the coffee's ordered. So if I wanted to sell something back to Paul, which I did in the end, I know the order and sequence in which Paul buys anything. It could be this pen, it could be 4 properties. There is a way that he buys something, and it is consistent. And I know the order and sequence in which he buys. So are you keen to find out how to do that? Because that's pretty good, isn't it? Oh good, we've got something there. The two most powerful ways, which are quite easy for you to absorb in 25 minutes, is by their eye patterns, what's happening with their eyes when you're talking to them and they're discussing things with you. And the second way is the words that they use. So in other words, if you're on the phone to somebody, you can still elicit it without having to see them. So this eye pattern chart, let me explain this. This is, at the bottom, it's got a normally organised right-handed person. Now what I mean by that is 80% of the population, if they're right-handed, this is how, as you look at the person, how they run their eye pattern charts. Now, what's an eye pattern chart? It's the way they process external information inside. So if you were to look at me, and I'll hold this one up, and you were to say, Charmaine, what carriage did you get on the train as you came here? I actually do it quite exaggerated, but other people might move their pupil quite slowly. But I would look and go, the third carriage. I would go and recall the information up here. And if you said, how about we have, next time you do this filming, we put a blue dress on, I'd probably visualise it up here and construct it. So above the eye, it's easy to remember, eyes looking up. It doesn't really matter if it's visual, if it's remembered or constructed at this stage, but it means they're visual people. So let's say you're with a couple, you're showing them around a house, one of them's talking to you, the other one isn't. By looking at that person's eye patterns, you can still work out how they're processing information. And auditory is very easy, it's where your ears are. So if you're talking to somebody, a husband and wife, she's chatting about what she needs and the husband's saying nothing, but he's looking from side to side, and you just happen to notice that. And you haven't really seen him look up and you haven't really seen him look down, but you've seen him sort of just glance from side to side. He's probably accessing his information auditory. He hears information. And then if the person is looking down, depending on how they're organised, so 80% of people are this pattern as you look at them. If they're looking down to the right, their feelings. There's different types of feelings. The feel of something, kinesthetic, how you feel about something, their state, their feeling. So they're seeing how I feel about this room, seeing how I feel about this house, they're feeling it. If they were to look down the other side, it means they're doing, AD stands for auditory digital, and it means it's usually self-talk first of all, and criteria and details. So, okay, they said the room is 4 metres by 4 metres, is 6 metres, and they're running it through. So they're going through the details. Now, why is this important? Well, because if you want to communicate back to somebody the way they are, the way that makes sense to them. If you speak to my husband, you just use auditory terms. He doesn't access looking up. And if you were to speak to me, I use visual terms. If you say, how does that look? Can you see what I'm saying? It makes sense to me, that neurologically, like the phone number would make sense. But to my husband, I'd say, can you hear what I'm saying? Does that ring a bell? Can you hear that? Does it sound right to you? And I'd use auditory words to him. It's incredibly powerful because you're now seamlessly communicating exactly neurologically how that person processes information from the outside world internally. Now, the most important thing, the reason this is so powerful and so easy is because as a salesperson, it's all about observing and having awareness what's going on. And if you hear any of my blogs, all I ever talk about is, as salespeople, often we're inward focused about what we want to achieve and our targets and what we're doing. And the whole of sales needs to be completely outward focused. What's my client doing? What other things are they looking at? Is this vendor going to come to me? Are they going to go elsewhere? Watching them. And these eye pattern charts and eliciting a buyer strategy, you have to be completely aware of what they're doing. There's no point asking a question and then glancing because their eyes will have done it. So you need to be really aware. So does that make sense, the eye pattern chart? It's incredibly powerful. So if somebody's not even answering you and they think, let's just say they think, I don't want to give away too much information. I'm sure that comes across sometimes. I don't want to give away too much information. But they're sitting there and they're going through their eye patterns. You can read already what they're doing. So awareness is the top thing when it comes to sales, and you can just keep drilling down and drilling down and drilling down. But if somebody's there and they're not saying very much, you can look at their eye patterns and you can still tell how they're processing internally. So you can match back how they think. So if it's auditory, you might say, like I said with my husband, how does that sound to you? Does that ring a bell? If they're kinesthetic, how do you feel about that? Does that feel right? You can often tell. They'll walk into a house and they'll touch something. Kinesthetic people that are strong kinesthetic can't walk anywhere without touching something. They couldn't cope at this desk if there was no pen to pick up. It runs high on their need to feel it. And auditory digital would be not always quiet, but they need to run the criteria through to themselves. So if you're on the phone to somebody, obviously this is really powerful because you can't see the eye patterns, but you can start to hear the words they're after. Now, I will say in sales, this isn't the important thing to focus on. In sales, you need to be finding out, obviously, why they're moving, where they're moving to, what's the drive, what's the weight of all the different reasons they're moving, you know, is it what's important to them, is it local coffee shops, is it transport, all the things you normally ask. There's a lot obviously happens before you put forward any sort of solution. But while they're talking, listen, the more they do the talking, the more you're getting different types of information. And you're getting all of that information, plus they feel listened to, plus you'll hear naturally these words come up. So it's no effort on your side at all. You'll naturally hear them say, yeah, I can see that, I can vision that, that's quite crystal clear. And you'll think, whoa, okay, this person's just reeled off 3 vision words to me, which means if I show them round, I'd say, how does that look? Can you see that room working for your son? How does this garden look to you? Is this clear? You'd be using visual words back. It's no effort. As long as they're doing the talking for most of the time, it's quite, and you've got great awareness, it's quite easy to hear the words. Because what I don't want you to do after this is sort of start staring at people in the face and trying to work them out. And don't try and do it in the mirror as well, because everyone always goes back home and they try and ask themselves a question, they look in the mirror and you can't do that. So words that are very powerful, that neurologically make sense to them are see, look, appear, view, show, dawn, reveal, illuminate. You can have this powerful, right? Twinkle, clear, foggy, focused, hazy, crystal, imagine, sharp, snapshot, vivid, and go on and on and on. They're really, really powerful words that make sense neurologically to that person. So if you were to maybe, if they, oh my goodness, both these couple that have come in are both really highly visual, you might say, how does it, this appears to me, you know, or a bird's eye view, or this is clear cut, catch a glimpse of, eye to eye, get a perspective on, get a scope on. That's a hazy idea. In light off, in view off, get a mental image, getting a picture is really powerful for people that are visual. Let me say to me, have a picture, I'm like there with the picture. So it's a very, very powerful one, have a picture. Or let's see to it, or let's take a peek at what we can do. So it's very, very powerful. So that's highly visual, and a lot of people you'll probably notice the visual people more, because it's often more obvious. The next one is auditory. So they might go, yeah, I hear you. Oh, I just want to listen to what you have to say. That sounds about right. Goodness, it's quite silent in here, isn't it? Oh, that rings a bell with me. You know, I just want to be heard. That you'll hear them say these words, resonate, outspoken, tell, announce. And again, you can then feed back only appropriately when you've practiced them, smooth. This is clear as a bell, outspoken. Does this ring a bell? Well, to tell you the truth, this does this. Let's tune in. You can tune out. That's unheard of. This is word for word what the person said. Let's voice an opinion on that. I've got an earful of what that person said. I heard you. Let's inquire into, keynote, loud and clear, power of speech, call on. That makes total sense to a person whose primary way of accessing external information is auditory. It neurologically makes sense to them. And kinesthetic, so there's different types of kinesthetics. I've actually put them up here. So it's feeling, the state you're in. So feeling, you could touch something, an external feeling and an internal feeling. The state, so a happy state, sad state. Tactile, so the touch of something, or the touch of someone. And meta means how do you feel about that? So it's how do you feel about moving? How do you feel about this property versus that property? You're accessing, and if you ask them that question, you're directing them, they'll probably access their kinesthetic state. So that's a kinesthetic. So you might see them touch things when they come in to the office, or when they go to a house, if they're looking to buy, they'll touch things all the time. And they might say things like, I get a grasp on that, I'll get a hold of, or that slipped through my fingers, the last house just slipped through our fingers. Or let's catch on to what's going on right now, you know, let's tap into this house, we want to throw this out, let's turn this around quickly. You'll hear these words, they're all feeling words, they're all kinesthetic words. And what, unfeeling, concrete, this is a concrete, scrape, get in the huddle, solid, impression, let's touch base. Let's touch base about this in a day. Like, somebody who says let's touch base, it runs a high kinesthetic. So sort of sentences you can say back are, it's all washed up, boils down to come to grips with, connect, control yourself, cool, calm and collected. There's firm foundations, floating on thin air. Let's get a handle on what you want. hand in hand, hang in there. It's heated argument between people, hold it or hold on, or let's lay our cards on the table. I'll pull some strings for you back in the office. Sharp as a tack. Oh, that slipped my mind. Let's start from scratch. They're all words that tap into kinesthetic.
I just realised which one I am.
Kinesthetic.
100% me.
Yeah.
100% me.
Which means your primary way of discussing with somebody else, so Zach just said that his one is kinesthetic, so your primary way of, what we do is we tend to think everybody else is motivated by what we're motivated by, and our language is what we project out. So you probably use a lot of that language on other people, which works very well on people that are kinesthetic. But of course, the whole of sales is being able to have a complete awareness and then adapting your style to your client. That's the beginning, middle, and end of sales. You need to have awareness of what's going on, awareness of the information they need to buy something or sell something, and then you adapt, awareness of their language, what internal programming they run, and then you completely adapt your style so you deliver back your solution or your offering in exactly the way that matches them. Not how you would do it to yourself, but what matches that person.
So some really great tips there from Charmaine about how to match the language of your clients with your own. Charmaine is one of our featured contributors in the current issue of Elite Agent magazine out this week. If you want to hear more from Charmaine, she regularly runs coaching sessions for salespeople and can be contacted at smarterselling.com.au. Next up, we have mindset coach Jed Xavier, who helps agents all around the world and all around Australia break through the mental barriers when skill alone just doesn't cut it. Remember, if you have any questions for our coaches or our Super Six, tweet us at Elite Agent Mag #transform. See you in the next video.